spending money on those things that you value and not on those things you don't, in this episode of Heavy Metal Money. Hey, so in this episode, we're going to quickly just talk through a book that really did change my life. It changed my mindset. It changed the way I think about money and when I spend money. And it was the book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And it was one of those things where I didn't even know who Ramit was. I first saw him at FinCon. He was one of the keynote speakers at FinCon in 2019. And I saw him speak, and it was super valuable. It totally, I was super inspired, and immediately the next week I went and got his book. And when I read that book, he talked about living your rich life, and everyone's life is different, and what you find value in may be different than what somebody else finds value in. And I love his quote. His quote is, spend extravagantly on those things that you love, but cut costs just relentlessly on those things you don't. And it really did change my mindset. It changed the way that I thought about spending money. And so this really came, this quick story, it came when I went down to Milwaukee to see a live show. This was right before the pandemic, and it was around Christmas time. And I was going to go down to Milwaukee for a day to catch a live metal show. Again, one of the things that I do spend money on is going to see live music. And I was heading down to the Very Hairy Christmas show by Steel Panther at one of my favorite venues in Milwaukee, the Rave. And in my planning, I remember I asked my uncle really quick. I said, hey, would you be around to drop me off at the airport? I know he lives nearby. He's usually up really early. And, I just was wondering, hey, if he could drop me off the airport, that'd be sweet. Save me a bunch of time and money in paying for parking. And, he's like, it's just not going to work out for him. He had a conflict that day. And, he said, why don't you just park at the airport? You always park at the airport. Now, normally I do park at the airport for work-related trips, right? But this was not work-related. It was pleasure. And this was a personal trip, and I was paying for it. And parking at the airport for $22 a day is just crazy, right? And I understand that I could park a little further away. I could save money. But I also really value time, and I value the convenience. So I totally get it that, if I want to pay to park there, it is the convenience of being really close, super quick, getting in and out of security, and being able to get to my gate. And so I totally get that. But what was interesting was how my uncle didn't really see how these things fit. And I'm gonna explain that. So when I was there in Milwaukee, I was there for one night, and I stopped at the hotel, and I stopped at the front desk as I was going out for dinner, and I said, hey, is there a place where have a really good dinner, a really good steak dinner? And they said, oh, well, you gotta go to the 5 o'clock steakhouse. Have you ever been there in Milwaukee? And I'm like, no, I've been here dozens of times, and I've never been to the 5 o'clock steakhouse. And they expressed that you have to experience it. It's really great. You got to go there. And so I got in my rental car, went over there, and I showed up, and there was a big sign on the door that said reservations required. And I was like, ruh-roh, like, what do I do? Now I noticed the time was 5 to 10 daily. Literally, they were only open for dinner. And so I quickly got inside, and they had already started seating people. But I went inside, and I basically just asked the host there. I said, hey, I didn't realize that you guys were reservations only, and wondering if they had a seat just for one guest. And they quickly rushed me inside, and they were like, no problem. They were super cool. The host grabbed the menu and said, quick, follow me. And they seated me in a small table in the back of the dining room. Super nice place, right? White linens, settings with candles and stuff on all the tables. And within minutes, the entire dining room was packed. Packed. And I asked one of the servers, I said, hey, was it always this busy? And they're like, oh yeah, like it's often they'll serve about 250 guests in one night between 5 and 10. It is crazy. And when they handed me the menu, I mean, again, I know this was a nice place, but they handed me the menu, and this was not like a quick, casual dining experience, right? We're talking $39 fillets, $48 New York strips, $70 prime rib, and even $140 lobster tail. It was crazy. Now, every dinner came with the same relish tray and a loaf of fresh bread and a salad. I politely declined the bread and ordered 2 little 4-ounce steak medallions with some shrimp. And it was absolutely amazing, right? Just amazing meal, super delicious. And it was a great way for me to enjoy dinner and a show that evening in Milwaukee. But one thing my uncle and I often do is we share our food and dining experiences. We often will, if one of us eats something good or whatever, or we're at a place with a unique menu item, we send photos and this and that. And so, I shared a pic with him, right? I shot a photo of my steak and shrimp with a glance at the menu. And he texted me back and he's like, dude, I just don't understand you. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, why would you wouldn't pay for parking, but yet you would pay $39 on a dinner? And again, it's one of those things where this is an easy justifiable expense. I find value in good food and an amazing dining experience, but I find no value in paying for parking. Like, not if I don't have to, right? Leaving my car in a lot at $22 a day is just crazy to me. To me, it's totally different things. So, I had a great time, and it's one of those things where it's just a reminder that to live your rich life, what are those things that you will spend lavishly and extravagantly on those things that you love, but you'll cut those costs just relentlessly on those things that you don't. One of the stories that Ramit says was he knew that when he could finally was earning enough money where he could order an appetizer. Like, that was the big thing, because growing up, you didn't have a lot of money. You would never, waste your money on an appetizer. And I now start to see and realize some of those things, right? And so now it's when I'm at a live show and if I want something to drink, I mean, for years, we're talking 20 years, I never would buy a drink at a show, right? I wouldn't buy a drink because it's, $9 for a Diet Coke. Like, it's absurd. And it still is absurd, but it's one of those things where you finally reach a point where you can order that drink and not feel guilty about it. And it's spending your money on those things you value and cutting those things that you absolutely can. Like, if you're going to save money on, the big ones, right? Like housing, groceries, transportation. Those are the big ones that you want to save. But I just thought it was an interesting story and I wanted to share. Thanks again. Leave a comment below, subscribe, and we will see you next time on Heavy Metal Money.